Welcome to In the News for January 21st, 2022. It's like 01212022. I am Brett Birdie from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. Lots of ones and twos, but it is good to talk with you again, my friend.
Almost and binary or something. I don't know.
I know. So many great links you had in this episode, this post of In the News, Jeff. I love the first story that you jumped off with. You and I have talked about AirTags several times in both, I think in good light and in bad light. And this week you have a story in the good light of how an AirTag helped. It sounds like a family that was moving, or the military. They were in the military and they were getting moved, right? And she used an AirTag to actually kind of track all of their possessions. Really, really neat story.
Yeah, it was a great story. And I have friends in the military. I'm sure we all do. And I know that, this whole PCS phenomenon where you move from station to station is something that they do, more often than perhaps they might want to do so. And to have your entire life, move all your possessions from place to place. And sometimes it takes a long time for that to happen. I know it can get frustrating, but she was so clever to put an AirTag with her stuff, attached to one of her kids' toys so that she could track it. There's so many interesting things to me about the story. One of them is the idea that it even just works. I remember when AirTags first came out, there were some people that tried doing that. They would ship an AirTag from one place to some place around the world. And, all it takes is, for an AirTag to know where it is for it to be within the vicinity of an iPhone. And there are so many iPhones out there that, if you have like a shipping container or something, somebody's going to pass by it that has an iPhone. But I also thought it was clever. I don't know what circumstance I will have to use this, but, maybe I could see, there have been times in the past where we've been at my mother-in-law's house up in New York for Christmas, and the kids get a bunch of Christmas presents and we'd ship them back home, and, just toss an AirTag in there to come to my house. That way, exactly where it is. Because it's always frustrating, when you use the tracking services. Some of them are better than others, UPS, FedEx, and stuff like that. Some of them are not as good, like DHL. I have often problems with, but having an independent source of here is where my package is. That's pretty good information. I like that. That's nice.
Right. This story is so fun to read because it sounds like they were moving from Colorado to New Jersey, I think, and the lady was tracking everything on AirTags, but then she got a call from the driver, the mover, saying, "Oh, well, I just left Colorado, right, and it's going to be another 3 or 4 days or something." But she was able to track it and see, actually, no, you are 4 hours away. Right. Ended up the driver apparently admitted he was going to see his girlfriend. And he just didn't want to deliver in that day or so. A happy ending to the story, but oh boy, wow, you just never know these days.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, we've all been in that situation where, some company is telling you something. You're like, I just don't feel like that's right, whatever it is.
Right, not quite
this time,
right.
She had the tools to actually know, no. I know exactly where you are. You're a few hours from my house.
Yeah, exactly. Don't try to pull one over on me. That's too crazy.
Great story.
All right. Well, another good story that you linked to, which was a kind of a feel-good story. Happy ending on this one too, which was fantastic.
Happy Friday today.
I had seen this one somewhere else, and let me set it up in this way. You and I have talked several times about stories where the Apple Watch has kind of saved the life, if you really want to go that far. Really, it just enables folks to reach out to somebody, call 911 or something similar, like when there was a commercial a week or two ago we talked about from Apple where somebody was in a ditch, somebody was out caught in the ocean, and they used their Apple Watch to call 911 and get rescued. This was a little bit of a different spin. This particular lady, I think she's a florist, right? Maybe in New Jersey or somewhere on the East Coast there. And she fell, hit her head pretty severely. She had a concussion, I think.
Yeah, sounds like
she didn't have I don't know if she had an Apple Watch on or not, but she did have her AirPods in because she was listening to podcasts or music. And when she came to, she was able to say, "Hey, Sally, call 911." And it worked. And she was able to be rescued because she was incapacitated. Great story. I'm glad you linked to this one too.
Yeah, and it just reminds you that being connected can be helpful in so many ways. And although an Apple Watch is a great way to do it, I mean, the Apple Watch she been wearing that, it may have actually noticed that she fell and called 911 automatically.
Right, that's right.
Whereas she had to be conscious enough, despite her injuries, to do it. But yeah, I mean, a great way. Another thing, if she had a HomePod or a HomePod Mini in her house, she might have been able to yell out to Siri and do the same.
Point.
There's lots of ways, but it's nice to have reminders that when you have these, don't forget that you have these ways to call for help, whether it's calling Siri, or I mean, for that matter, you could just yell out to your HomePod or HomePod Mini and say, call, my daughter or something like that. And that would probably work too. So there's, in times of trouble where you're not necessarily thinking clearly, don't forget that you have these options out there. And thank goodness she had this one.
As if to underscore your comment there, Jeff, this lady, Ms. Putman, even discussed in this story, she says, I have a 25-year-old and a 27-year-old daughter, and they had no idea that you could use your AirPods in this way, pushing her, this lady here, to say, I want more people to know about this. Like, you need to remember this. And then this last paragraph here I thought was great. She was actually, this lady was on a call with Apple support. Apparently she was talking about something with her iPad, and she mentioned to the technician on the call about this story. And the technician said, you need to email CEO Tim Cook about this. And the lady says, I was in disbelief. I didn't think it would work, but she got a reply. And so anyway, it's just a happy ending to a story here. And it's just good. I'm glad that you linked to it, because for that comment that you made, people just need to be aware of this. Like, we have these tools, and of course we know there's a lot of other things on your plate that you're thinking about, but it's great that we have some of these tools. And I like to highlight stories like this simply because I think it will highlight the fact that we do have these tools, and you should be aware of it.
Yeah, and I like that, for example, here, I mean, and maybe the fact that she got some response from Tim Cook gave her some credibility, but this article that you're showing is in People magazine. So that's a pretty, broad, that's something that can be, leafing through that as they're sitting in their dentist office or their hairdresser or whatever. Hopefully this would help to get the story out there. And that really is great for people to know, because that's the key part, is to even know that you have the ability to do this.
That's fantastic. So it would be curious to know if Ms. Putman here prefers green bubbles or blue bubbles.
We know that she is a blue bubble.
Oh my goodness, that she is a blue bubble. Okay, this was a great article that you linked to, but let's just set it up real quick, because over the last 2 to 3 weeks, if anybody has been seeing some of the headlines, especially in Wall Street Journal, this was
about 2 weeks ago, I think started a bunch of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. This was a story that came out, and it's a little controversial, at least from some of the folks like us that kind of looked a little askew at sort of the headline here, which is why Apple's iMessage is winning. Teens dread the green text bubble. John Gruber, another article, a blogger that we follow quite a bit, went through a very lengthy discussion about
rebuttal, I would call it.
Exactly.
There's a lot of problems with this article, but there are some elements of truth in it. So
yes, agreed. Yeah. So the story basically is talking about that amongst teenagers, I think primarily is what the article was talking about here. Teens dread the green text bubble. Is this idea that teenagers today, since we talked about a story a couple of weeks ago, 87% of teenagers theoretically are using iPhones. That means if they create a chat group in the Messages app on the iMessage platform, obviously all the people that have iPhones are going to have the blue text bubbles, right? But if there's one person in that group, or whoever, multiple people that have an Android phone or a non-iPhone, their text bubbles are not blue, they are green. Now, I know most everybody watching or listening probably knows exactly what we're talking about, and you probably have been frustrated by this. The elements of truth that you mentioned, Jeff, on this story, I will tell you, my own 16-year-old daughter went to a camp. There was about 5 or 6 other girls that she started a chat group with, and sure enough, there was one young lady that did not have an iPhone. And I remember my daughter came back and just kind of complained about it. Oh, it's great that we have this chat group, but we can't use the emojis in this group. We can't do some of the things that we typically do with everybody if they have an iPhone, because this one young lady has an Android. So I do believe you're right. There is an element of truth here. I can see this. I think the article went maybe just a little too far, as John Gruber points out. But this opens up a little bit more. I see this a lot too, even from a communication standpoint. Do you have blue bubbles or green bubbles, and which do you prefer?
Yeah, and where this particular Wall Street Journal article went wrong is sort of implying that the whole reason that Apple's successful is because they force everybody to stay in a blue bubble world. I think that's maybe going a bit too far. But it is true. I mean, we've all been in situations where, I wish the other person had a blue bubble because, for example, you could see that the three dots that they're starting to type you something, and exactly receipts and all those sorts of things. Not to mention the more fun things like emoji. But as I think you're about to go to, messages is not all wonderful news, because as Jason points out in this article from Macworld, there's a lot of things, messages has not developed as quickly as you think it would, because the truth of the matter is, although I seriously doubt that the entire reason for the iPhone's success is its iMessage system, I think it's absolutely true that messages is a critically important app on the iPhone. I mean, I think that a lot of folks, and some people use texting more than others, of course. And then, there are some teams that aren't even using texting as much. They're communicating with each other through other means, Discord and other things like that. But no one can deny that messages are important. And I almost feel like, I wish it was developed more. I mean, a good example Jason has in this article is that Apple came up with the ability to have in-app things in messages that you could have within messages. You could have an app, and Apple came out with it, and I use it sometimes, but it wasn't a huge success, and then it just sits there and hasn't been, nobody's changed it, nobody's done more with it. And so you do get the feeling that I wish Apple was doing more with the messages system, and that's sort of what Jason talks about. Again, what we have is great, but it just seems like for something as important as messages, it could be better.
We started out, for all of us that have been using technology and mobile phones for so many years, we've always had some form. We generally call it text messaging, but there are obviously communication standards or protocols that this is built on. We had the SMS, right? Short message service, I think, and then we had MMS. Some of us have seen some of these acronyms from multimedia messaging service, and the iPhone, when Apple came out with this, and I think it was 2010, 2011 or so, when they actually came out with the idea, like, we know people want to have text messaging. And the fact is, Apple does support those older SMS messages. That's the reason that there is a green bubble on there. Like, you can use the iMessage platform, which is what the Messages app uses, to communicate either to other iPhone users, which is going to be the blue bubbles because it is going through the iMessage platform from Apple. But you can also communicate with any phones, right? Dumb phones, Androids, it doesn't matter. But it goes to that green bubble because that is just a visual sign that you are communicating with somebody over the SMS protocol, that kind of a thing. I don't know. I don't think we need to get too much more geeky in that, but just to give everybody...
that I will point out that at the very beginning, when the iPhone came out, one of the things, and it's been so long now that people forget it, but one of the revolutionary things about the iPhone was to have this sort of graphical messaging system, because before the iPhone, messaging, I mean, even putting aside the fact that to type, you had like 3 letters on each key, you'd have to be 666, 2244. So let's even put that aside, but just the idea of having a system where you could see the messages one after the other, and you could have one page of my messages with Brett and another page with my messages with my wife. That did not exist beforehand. And so Apple, took a something that was, it worked, but it was so rudimentary. And Apple really made it so much better with the original Messages app. And then, so let's not forget that. And then and then of course everybody copied that, and Android has it and everything too.
That's right.
And then a couple of years later, that's when Apple decided to up the game with the iMessage, the blue bubbles, so to speak, and add all the other features that we now take for granted.
Another thing Jason points out in this article is this is really a problem in the United States and not very much other place. Even though iPhones are very popular across the world, not as popular as they are in the United States, But even if they use iPhones in other countries, they are not typically using the iMessages platform. They're using WhatsApp or WeChat or even Snapchat, or there's several, what is it?
Line, there's lots of other ones. Yeah.
Many other chat apps. And it really is only in the United States. And I think either Jason or maybe another article that he links to in here has gone through some of the history on this, is simply because, in the very beginning, if you remember, we had to pay for some of the messages that we would send back and forth. And to get around that, at least in other countries, and maybe even here in the United States to some extent, we would use other apps to do that, so that we didn't have to pay for each message that we would have to send or receive. It's really an interesting conundrum, I guess. I love Jason's article. I think he's got a good point, and really the thrust of it is that Apple iMessage has failed in this, and I think maybe that's just a little bit of a headline grab there. But he does. And
let me just pause for a second and say, often people, like when you write an article for Macworld, someone else writes the headline. I'm not sure. I think that failed is a little bit of an exaggeration, but is not achieved its full potential. Absolutely, yeah.
And one of his points in here is that other U.S. carriers, U.S.-based carriers, have banded together to create RCS. We have SMS, MMS, and I'm sure 100 others, but RCS is Rich Communication Services. This is a replacement to traditional SMS text messaging. Google supports it. Apple does not support that yet. And he even says there's no indication that they will. And I think his point is maybe Apple should consider that at least. It's just going to be interesting to where this goes. One other last thing quickly, I would say, I remember a few years ago at the American Bar Association Tech Show, I think you and I were both there. There was a speaker from EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, right? He was talking about security, and he was adamant about saying that the iMessage platform is probably the most secure that you're gonna encounter. I don't know if that's changed or not, but I just remember he was very focused on providing that. Like, it is very secure, and I think to your point earlier that it's not a failure. The iMessage platform is not necessarily a failure. It is very secure, and it is very convenient. Certainly, if you are communicating with another iPhone user, but where do we go from here, I think, right? How do we become a little bit more universal? And I don't know if we have an answer to that yet. We don't know what Apple necessarily is doing specifically on this, but it's just going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. So to address two of those things you mentioned, the RCS one first. RCS does bring to Android and other platforms, but it's really just Android, a lot of the things that are missing that Messages has had since for so many years now. Things like the read receipts and the dots of somebody's typing, and the ability to have richer multimedia, the ability to quickly jump into a video or call from the message. A lot of the features that it's the reason that people are happy. Now, not all of them, of course, because there's some things special to Apple, such as the Memoji that you were talking about before, but a lot of them. And as Jason points out in the article, there may be some technical issues with doing it, but it actually seems like it makes sense. Why not? We do have to communicate with Android people, even if most of the people that you're talking to are iPhone folks, and it would be nice for iPhones to be able to take advantage of that too. So I think that would be nice for Apple to have that. And in terms of the security, I mean, it is nice that when you send something through iMessage, it is encrypted end to end. So you don't have to worry about somebody interrupting the message. And I know that that's a lot of people that have, a lot of attorneys, for example, that have, very severe confidentiality needs because of the nature of the client, and the client may be a political who knows what the situation is. I will note, however, that even though iMessages is encrypted, there is there's something else to consider, which is they're encrypted end to end, which means from the other person to your phone. Right. But then once they're on your phone, they're not encrypted. And that if somebody else picked up your phone, if they were logged in, they could just look through your messages. And if you use Apple's iCloud service to back up your phone, that I don't believe has the level of encryption. So if the government was to tell Apple, hey, I want to get a copy of, Brett Burney's, backup of his phone that he's doing on iCloud because he is some big criminal that's involved in some nefarious stuff, then Apple could provide that pursuant to a subpoena, and they would in effect be able to get into your messages, not because they're encrypting it in the end-to-end portion, but because once it's on your phone there, unless you've deleted it, the message is there. So, and but of course you could, if that was something that concerned you, you could get around it by not using iCloud to back up your phone. You could either not back up your phone at all, or you could only back it up to a local computer and then use there's options for that, and you can then set up ways that you're going to keep your own computer safe. So you get to decide how you want to deal with that security. And I think it's important to know, yes, it's secure, but there's a big but there. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to do with messages, and I hope that it continues to develop in ways that are that do even more. I tell you, I still get delighted by simple little things though, like when it's your birthday and somebody sends you a text message that says happy birthday, and it automatically causes the fireworks on the screen. I feel like I almost forget about it every year, and then it happens. I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
it is the convenience aspect, Jeff. I mean, that's the thing. I know there are other apps that I use, and I've used WhatsApp before, but very, very sparingly, because even if I thought that would be a better way to communicate with somebody, it's almost like an additional challenge that I have to explain to them, go download this app, and, you got to create an account on that, and you have to, it looks a little bit different, and they're not just as comfortable with it. Like I try to keep sort of like the common man user or common woman user, the common user in mind in a lot of this, because it's like that's an additional hurdle that they would have to get. It's not a big one. I get it. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But for a lot of people that just don't want to spend the time, the Messages app is right there. They open it up and it just works in the way that so many other things that we talk about do when it comes to the Apple ecosystem. And yes, there's other options that you can use, but I don't know. I feel like it's going to be, even Jason talks about here, RCS is not encrypted, to your point, which that means it's not going to fully replace something like from iMessage. And then he even says, if Apple does support RCS, do they have a different colored bubble? Do we have orange bubbles then in addition? I mean, it's just too many bubbles on this. The last thing quickly, because I know this is interesting for us and maybe not some of the other folks. One thing John Gruber put in here, which I just thought was interesting, is if you are communicating iPhone user to iPhone user, it's a blue bubble, right? If it's iPhone to an Android, it's a green bubble. And so Gruber's question, inexplicably, he says that the app icon for the Messages app is green. I just love that. I never thought of it that way, but it's like, wait, no, shouldn't it be blue? Because
I actually disagree with that, though. Because that's the whole point, is that when Messages, as I was saying, when Messages first came out, it was for SMS. So of course it was green.
Oh,
and in my mind,
okay.
iMessage service is a subset of all of the messages. So, maybe if you want to be more accurate, it should be a big green icon with like a little blue portion of it, or something like that, which would be silly. But but I understand the point, especially if all you do is communicate with the blue bubble folks. The idea that there's a green bubble on your icon, I guess I understand that.
Oh, that's okay. It's funny. So anyway, blue bubble. We accept all colored bubbles, whatever color that you may be. It's great, and we're glad that you're listening here. But
maybe we like people better if they're blue bubbles. Do we admit that?
I don't know. Maybe just
maybe a little bit. I don't know.
It's just funny. I thought, again, just to round it out, the Wall Street Journal article was really tons and thousands of tweets go on about this, and people are talking about this. Is it discriminatory in a way? I mean, I think the Wall Street Journal, what did it say? Android users trigger a little less cool green bubble. Ew, that's gross, is what the Wall Street Journal was quoting from one of the kids that they were interviewing. I do think we'll see some changes here. But as I was alluding to, it can't be too drastic, I think. And we'll just kind of see which way that Apple falls on this, right? If you're in the United States and you have an iPhone, it's the easiest thing to use. If you're elsewhere, obviously you're already using something else. And we'll just kind of see how this story evolves over time. So let's go from blue-green bubbles to something a little more fun. We've been talking about the Matter technology and the Thread technology, and then of course that the bigger umbrella here is smartphone or smart homes, and all of the technology involved with this. You had a good link to this Wemo Stage with Thread review. So I'm glad we're gonna probably keep talking about this, because I feel like this is yet one of the next horizons that we're just going to continue to see a lot more automation coming into the home.
Here's why I thought this article was particularly interesting. This is on Apple Insider by Andrew O'Hara, and he has been using this device for a while. I think he said since the middle of last year, called the Wemo Stage.
Yeah.
And what it is it's a little thing you can hold in your hand, or you can put it on the wall and make it look like a wall switch. And it has 3 buttons on them, and you can actually do 6 things with it because you can either press a button or hold it down. So it's got 6 functions, and you can program those functions so that when I press this button, I want to have like these 3 lights go on. When I press this button, I want to change this light over here to a different color. You can do, you can program things. And of course, if you had your iPhone in your hand, you could do all of that using the Home app, but sometimes it's nice to just have a simple button that you can press. So that's the device. But what I thought was interesting about this article is when the Wemo Stage came out last year, it used Bluetooth to work over HomeKit. And he said that he didn't even write a review of it at the time because it was slow. You would press the button and wait, and then eventually it would do it. Maybe not that exaggerated, but then Wemo updated the product. So it's the exact same hardware that added thread support. And he said suddenly, and he shows it off in a video here, that, he presses a button, and as soon as he presses that button, the light comes on or off, which of course is what you would expect for it to do. And so, I don't know if every single thread product will have such a dramatic increase in speed, but this is certainly what we hope to see, right? We're hoping that this upcoming thread protocol, which is already available in products you can buy today, we want it to be faster. He also points out that it's supposed to be much more efficient, although he hasn't tested it yet. He said that on the Bluetooth version, it lasted about 9 months before he had to replace the little battery in it. And, time will tell, but he's hoping that with the thread version of the exact same product, it's going to last much longer. So this is a report from the field showing that when you move over to thread, it really does make a difference. And this is aside from some of the other advantages of thread that this particular product may not have, because not all thread devices are created equal, but many thread devices have the option of being part of a mesh network, so that instead of just having, my routers control my mesh network, you could actually have every home automation device throughout your house could extend a mesh network. And usually that's just going to be for the things that are plugged in. Something like this that's wireless probably won't use the power to do it. But Thread offers a lot of advantages, and this post exposes some of those advantages and says, yeah, they really do work. It really is better.
Well, thanks to you, I'm kind of going down that thread rabbit hole a little bit, because I had known about it. I'd seen people talk about it, but you've been doing a great job of linking to some of these, basic technologies to where I can see where it can have a practical use. And I think as it goes in here, he says in this little section of this article, Thread is a game changer. We can't say enough how much Thread has improved this device. Thread, I like this because an Apple Insider does another article here as well. That is an emergent connectivity standard. When we started first hearing about home automation and, the Philips Hue light bulbs and some of the things that you can control, I believe it had all really been based on either your existing Wi-Fi network or, as you've been alluding to, some Bluetooth capabilities. But both of those technologies are very ancient. We've been using Wi-Fi for many, many, many years, and Bluetooth as well. And I think what I liked about this article and what you are bringing up too, Jeff, is we're seeing the limitations today of what Wi-Fi can do, at least with automation components. And we're seeing limitations of Bluetooth. And the fact that maybe this Thread technology, which, by the way, Apple has also agreed to as well, a little quietly, but they are helping that, because that's what the HomeKit now supports the Thread. And I'm happy that you continue to bring these articles up, because it's helping me to better understand where Thread can start to make a big difference. And like you said, this article, I thought he just did a really good job of explaining this.
Yeah. The bottom line is, here's the takeaway. If you're looking to buy some smart home device for your home, obviously you should be considering, does it work with HomeKit? Because if you use Apple stuff, you want to have that. Right. But any product that supports Thread, that is another, check in the column of why you might want to choose that versus a competitor, because it means that it's going to be presumably more compatible in the future and offer more features and better battery life and faster range. And so as I buy things in the future, it's absolutely something I'm going to look for. There may be definitely cases where I decide to buy something notwithstanding the lack of Thread support, but whenever I see Thread support, that's going to be something I'm real happy to see.
Well, let's move from blue and green chat bubbles to 5G. Because if you hadn't seen some headlines about blue, the color of your text message bubbles, you probably have been seeing some headlines about 5G. And most recently, this is because some of the the FFA and a lot of the airlines have tried to stop AT&T and Verizon, mostly those are the two big carriers in this space, from rolling out their more advanced 5G networks, claiming, and understandably so, claiming that this could interfere with some flight instruments on. So I think the latest news that we've seen is AT&T and Verizon are starting to roll out, but not around airports.
Yeah,
right?
they worked out
but
a
it
deal.
is coming out. Yeah,
we talked about this a couple of months ago that planes have that technology, which has been around forever, that as a plane is starting to land, it can see precisely how high it is. It's an altimeter, and the altimeter, if you have 5G turned on, because the radio spectrum that 5G uses and the radio spectrum that the altimeter uses are right next to each other. And so there's the risk that something at the very top of one band might interfere with something at the bottom of another band. And, obviously nobody wants to be in a plane that's being unsafe as it's landing. If it's a clear day, it perhaps doesn't matter. But if it's snowy and cloudy and the pilot can't see anything, relying upon instruments to land, you want to be safe. And so they've been going back and forth for months, and finally they reached this deal in the United States that they're not going to turn on the C-band, which is a part of 5G that uses the spectrum that I was just describing. They're not going to turn it on very close to airports so that we don't hopefully have that concern, but they are going to turn it on elsewhere. And so what does this mean for you and me? What it means is that if you have a phone that supports 5G, and specifically if it supports the C-band, there's 5G and there's 5G. If it supports the C-band portion of 5G, as the newest iPhones would, then if you're in an area where this is turned on, you should see even faster service. And I will tell you, for me personally, are you using 5G right now, Brett? On any
see, that's the question.
This is what I was going to get into. It's a mixed bag right now.
It is exactly.
It's going to vary depending on where you are. I'm here in New Orleans, and I have 5G on my iPhone. I had it on last year's Model 2, and I have it turned on that there's a mode that says use 5G if it's available, and it's not going to slow down your phone if it's not going to use up too much battery life. That's one of the key choices in settings. But it means that if I'm not within Wi-Fi, and often I am, of course, but if I'm out and about, then it will use 5G. And I will say that we all know that in theory, 5G should be faster. Every once in a while, I will do a test and I will say, use one of those speed apps, and I'll use the speed app using 5G, and then I'll turn off 5G and I'll use the speed app using 4G LTE. And sometimes 5G is faster, but oftentimes LTE is faster just in terms of the raw number that I get from a download speed. Upload is actually usually faster for me in 5G, but even that varies. Now, having said that, except for looking at a number on the speed test app, I have never been in a situation where I have been, outside of Wi-Fi using 5G and thought, wow, this is just so slow, I can't function. It's been fine. The difference between 5G and 4GE is minuscule. And I also know that just looking at the number is only one metric, because another advantage of 5G is that if you have a lot of congestion, 5G can handle the congestion better, so that it's not just that my top speed is such and such, but that my continued throughput is going to be better. So I feel like it's probably better to have 5G turned on. But what I haven't seen a lot of is there's a special part of 5G that's incredibly fast. That's, even faster than many people's Wi-Fi. And that is, you have to be very close to a specific cell tower for it. And I know that in theory, we have some here in New Orleans. I have not yet been close to one to see it. But I guess that's going to come more and more in the future. So 5G is one of those things that it's confusing. Just because you see the 5G at the top of your phone doesn't necessarily mean anything. And now, as this article mentions, you're going to start to see something new on the top of your phone. If you're a Verizon customer and you're using C-band, your phone's going to say 5G UW. And if you are an AT&T user, it's going to see 5G plus, and it's, nobody knows what any of these things mean. It's just confusing. But
this has been one of the most frustrating things with mobile phones over the years, Jeff. Truly, honestly, and really, I kind of lay the blame at the feet of the carriers.
Oh gosh,
because I know it, from a marketing standpoint, I know what they're, I know generally what they want to do, but it has just been so confusing for most of it. Even me, I try to make sense out of it. And this is not something new. Even when we had 3G, which by the way, I'm going to show that,
we'll get to that video. In a second, yeah.
Yeah. But even from 3G to 4G to LTE to 5G, it's like just what you said. You made one comment. Those numbers and those letters sometimes don't even mean anything. I mean, because I'm east of Cleveland, several minutes east of Cleveland, Ohio is where I'm based out of. And where I am, all I have is LTE. But if I start driving into the city, then sure enough, that LTE will change to 5G, not 5G plus, because I'm on AT&T. But I see 5G and I think to myself, oh, well, goodness gracious, this has got to be more advanced. I must be even faster.
Living in the future.
But I've had the exact same experience, Jeff. It doesn't mean necessarily that it's faster. And frankly, what a lot of, and this was a great article you linked to on Gizmodo, and I think it explains a lot of it, not everything, but a lot of it, is the sense that it's just sort of it's a marketing word that they're using with 5G. It makes me feel good, but it doesn't really mean anything when it comes to the sense that it may not be much faster even than LTE. And in some cases, it might be even incrementally slower. Like it's just like a marketing phrase sometimes. And that infuriates me a lot of times, but we've lived with it for decades now. I don't know what the carriers, continue to do on it, but now it's even more confusing. It's like 5G UW or 5G plus, all of the four main, carriers, or I guess 3 or 4 of the main carriers, they all have their own networks, right? And so they just tweak them a little bit and change them up just slightly so that it is still confusing on this. But yeah, I guess I'll be looking for 5G plus on my phone when and if and that's the C-band, right? But there's this little image right here that it's only in about not even 10 cities right now, like Detroit, Austin, Chicago, obviously. So we'll see how quickly it can roll out to even places where we are.
Yeah, and that's happened with every time they've upgraded their networks. It's been a slow rollout.
Absolutely.
Eventually it'll get better, and I'll have it. This is probably a good point to which you alluded to before, which was the thing that I put at the end of my post, which was a cute little video from Joanna Stern at the Wall Street Journal, in which she remembers 3G, because 3G is about to be turned off. It's going to be turned off for AT&T in February, and then for all carriers in the United States by the end of the year. But what I thought was interesting is going back in time, because iPhone comes out in 2007. It uses the Edge network, which was pretty painfully slow. And then when 3G came around in 2008 with the iPhone 3G, it was markedly, it was faster. And, compared to today's speeds, it was a little laughable. But at the time, it changed us from loading a web page on a mobile device was just ridiculous to it was usable, not as fast as your home computer, but usable. And so 3G was that was an example of something that wasn't just marketing hype. It was a true increase, and now we've moved beyond it. But as 3G itself is finally being shut down so that the carriers can reuse that old 3G spectrum to improve 5G, I think it's a tip of the hat is due to 3G, because it was pretty important for its time.
One of the comments I remember in this video, she said 3G really gave birth to the modern day mobile phone.
That's a good phrase. I agree with that. Yeah.
It's like here we are complaining, I'm complaining about LTE and 5G, but I do remember those days. And this is a screenshot from Joanna's video here. On the iPhone 4 on 3G, the same web page took 39 seconds to load on a mobile phone, which really, in the grand scheme of things, is not a long time. But that same
it is
web
a long
page,
time if you're trying to get some information.
If you're sitting, absolutely,
that's a long time to stare at your screen.
The same web page on an iPhone 12 Pro on 5G, because I think she was in New York, in downtown Manhattan doing this, it was less than 5 seconds. So when back in the day with iPhone 4, we thought that was absolutely amazing. Of course, websites were a little bit different, a little more plainer or simpler than that time. So there's a lot of other factors that go into this. But still, this comparison here was a little eye-opening, and it made me think, you know what? We have come a long way. It took some time, and it took a lot of confusion many times on the basic user, but it got so much better, and it will continue to get better. And so this gave me hope watching this video. I'm so glad that you linked to it. Good stuff. All right, let's do some tips. And I think both of us have a couple of, I guess I would call them book centered
let's
tips,
be scholarly,
which I just think is great.
Books.
Well, so I guess maybe because of the pandemic, or just because it's something that I've always wanted to do, whether it's New Year's resolutions for a couple of years or so, I've wanted to do a better job of reading. All of us enjoy reading books whenever we can, but I've really enjoyed going to the Gasp paper books. I don't know exactly why, but we've got a fantastic library here not too far away. And so it's just been so incredibly convenient to go to the library and to use it. So I'm always looking for something, interesting and new, both fiction, nonfiction, business, certainly on the technology side. And I found this website the other day, which I just think is fantastic. 5books.com. You spell it out, Five, 5books.com. And it's a series of experts, or it's sites and stories that they found around the web, that they literally just come up with a recommendation for 5 of the best books. And you can go into the nonfiction here and go to the technology, or even subtopics here for artificial intelligence. Or one of my kicks right now is I'm trying to learn more about blockchain and cryptocurrency. And sure enough, there are the top 5 books based on the recommendations they have found from across the web and their own experts, that all of these links go to Amazon, by the way. So obviously, the site has a purpose to get you to Amazon, and then they get a cut of that, which is good for them. I'm glad that somebody is at least filtering some of these out for me. But I've just found some fantastic books. Some I have purchased, many of them I will get from my local library if they have it, that kind of a thing. And anyway, I've wasted too much time on this website because it's so fun just to go through whatever topic that you want to search for. They have at least a few books that you can get started with, and then it sort of, like most people, I would think, we kind of start going down a rabbit hole, because those books will show other books, or if you go to the Amazon site, it shows others as well. But I've just really been enjoying reading some paper books. I guess one of the links is that I immediately go to my library. And by the way, it's paper, or many times they're only available even on as an ebook, right? So Jeff, I'll use Hoopla, or even the Kindle app to read a book electronic book that I've checked out of the library. So that works. And then since I'm a Spotify user, I've got a great little Spotify playlist. This is my tech pull in here that I put on. It's just jazz ballads, and it's just been a lovely evening ritual for myself. And so 5books.com is my site that I would offer for folks today.
That's a great one. That's a great one. When I saw that you were recommending this and you mentioned the library, I was like, oh, this is a good opportunity. I haven't talked about this. So I have 2 recommendations for folks for libraries, which is that you don't necessarily have to go to the library and get those paper books. But instead, you can, I think most libraries around the country are a part of one of these services. And the 2 that I'm going to talk about are the ones that my local library uses in New Orleans. One is called Flipster, and it's an app on your iPad that you can use to read magazines for free. So what you do is you download the Flipster app, and then you put in your library card. So you have to have a library card, which you can get for free from the local library. And then you can read magazines, and it's the popular magazines. It's like, the People magazines and the, food magazines and GQ and those sorts of things. I think to myself, it's like the magazines that you would see, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, if you're sitting in the barber's office or the dentist's office or the doctor's office. It's the sort of things that you used to just see on a coffee table type things.
You're going to flip through.
I'm not going to subscribe to any of these things, but sometimes it's fun just to sort of flip through them and look at the pictures and, all that sort of stuff. Just the other day, I was, People magazine had that cover the other day of when Betty White turned 100. And of course, unfortunately, she passed away. But I was like, well, let me take a look at this issue. And I was just flipping through it and seeing some old pictures of Betty White. And I was like, oh, wow, look at all the cool things that she did.
Right.
So, but again, would I have gone out and bought that issue of People? No. But would I flip through it on my iPad on my beautiful big screen? Yeah, sure. Why not? So, so that's Flipster, and that's one thing that you should take a look at. And then another one that I haven't done a review of on iPhone JD yet, but I've mentioned, it's called Hoopla, and you just mentioned it too.
Yes,
and
I
so
did.
Hoopla works with your local library, and you can download ebooks. You can download all sorts of stuff. You can actually get
audiobooks
and stuff like that. But the one that I've used it for is graphic novels. Now, let me say, basically that's a fancy word for comic books. And before I used Hoopla, there are people out there that are serious comic book people, and they know that the issues come out and all that stuff. That is not me. The last time I paid attention to comic books is when I was a little kid buying Richie Rich at the corner store because my grandparents would let me buy an issue when I spent the weekend with them, or maybe sometimes Mad Magazine or Cracked or something like that. But then I did not pay any attention to this, but I had heard people say, oh, there's these graphic novels that are, mature. This is, they don't have to be, but they often are. And there are some good stories out there. So I downloaded the Hoopla app. I put in my credentials for my library, and
yes.
I'm going to recommend 4 specific ones that I've read on my iPad.
Okay.
And again, for me, I knew nothing about this world. And so these were new to you, for me. For people that really know comic books, me mentioning these is going to be so obvious. It's going to be like somebody saying, oh, there's a series of movies called Star Wars you might want to learn about. And these are so obvious. But for me, they were great. So there was one called Saga, Sagee, by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. And people sort of say it's sort of like a Star Warsy, it's a futuristic, aliens, other planets and stuff. And it is mature. Some of the pictures in it are graphic, so you should know that. But it's a great story. And most libraries you can get, they've been around long enough that they've put together a bunch of the issues, like issues 1 through 10 or 1 through 20 might be together in a single volume that you can get them. And so I just,
that looks good. A
couple years ago went through them, and it's a great story. One day, I am sure Saga will be the next, Game of Thrones or something like that on HBO. I mean, it's going to happen. It's a great story.
Okay.
So Saga's a good one. There's another one that I enjoyed also from Brian K. Vaughan called Why, The Last Man. And this one actually was turned into a TV series that was just canceled after the first season. So it didn't do very well. But even though the TV series did not go on, the story is really good. It's a story about, I don't think it gives too much away, that, all the men in the world except for one die because of this pandemic. And so it's just women that are left, and all the dynamics that go on. And there's cool stories. I really enjoyed reading that one. Then another one that I enjoyed reading the graphic novel of was Watchmen, which of course was a huge movie on HBO. And the HBO version was a little different than what the graphic novel was by Alan Moore, but I really enjoyed Watchmen. So that's a good one that I read on my iPad for free using Hoopla. And then there's one that I've started but haven't finished yet by Neil Gaiman, who has, famously written all sorts of fancy sci-fi stuff, called Sandman. And that's been around for a very long time. It's a classic one. And again, I've only started to get through it, but these are good things. And one of the nice things about Hoopla for graphic novels, and the Comixology app works the same way for comics that you purchase.
Another great app.
See the full page on your iPad, which is great if you have a big iPad Pro screen like I do. But you can also get into a mode where, like, you tap in and the iPad will focus on one pane, and then when you swipe, it will go to the next pane, which might be to the right or might be down. And so you can go pane by pane, which makes things bigger. So it's an improvement over having a physical book in your hand, because you can get in close and you can really see the images and stuff. It's a nice way to read stuff, and I've enjoyed doing it. And I'll go 8 months without reading anything, and then I'll pick it up and I'll read something again. But if you haven't explored this, I mean, all this stuff you can get for free through your local library. It's
pretty incredible.
Yeah, I'm big thumbs up for me. I mean, there's more stuff than you could ever even think about reading out there.
I'm going to start digging in again, because I've used that Comixology app in the past, just because people were talking about it. I wanted to try it out, and exactly what you talked about, that you can go into different modes. You can see the whole page. You can focus in on one of the squares, and that's great. And I would just quickly, in a similar way, you got me now wanting to go back to the magazines too. When I've used other apps, I don't think I've ever used Flipster, but I will this afternoon. That in the magazines, in a similar way, it's a little bit of a more intricate experience, because even how on the front of the cover of a magazine, a lot of times they'll have, like, here are the stories inside. But I don't know if this is true in Flipster, but you can tap on that, like you're almost able to, and that to me just blew me away the first time I was looking at an electronic magazine. That I don't know why it hasn't caught on more. I'm sure there's some good reasons, but it's just a much better experience. Maybe because it is still in sort of the 8.5 by 11 magazine. It's really just making a change from the paper side, but it's such a much better experience to me. It's a much richer experience, because instead of, like, at the end of a magazine article where it says flip to page 51 to finish this, instead of like flipping through all the rest of the pages, which of course is what they want you to do, I just tap on that, and a lot of times it'll take me right to that page. And so I'm thrilled that you are mentioning both of these. How fun, man! Some good reading.
Yeah, it makes you wish you could just sort of take off from life for a week or a month.
I know.
And just read. Just read. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, that's some good tips. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Okay, I think we've come to the end again. I didn't think there was going to be a lot to talk about today, but always enjoy talking with you, Jeff. And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.